everyone, my name is Zoe Byington, and this is our Gerontology Talks. I am coming to you from Washington, D.C., and I am a upcoming recent graduate, almost there, from Georgetown University studying aging and health. I also just received my undergraduate degree from the Pennsylvania State University studying political science and Spanish, and I come to you as a caretaker myself, and I'm here today with Sherri Snelling.
Well, thank you, Zoe, and I'm so excited to be here for our Gerontology Talks. As Zoe said, I'm Sherri Snelling, and I'm a corporate gerontologist and CEO of the Caregiving Club. And my background is I've spent the last 18 years in the aging and family caregiving space. And my Caregiving Club company, we focus on consulting for organizations that are both large and small, mostly in the employer channel, to help them understand caregiver wellness and other ways that we can support our family caregivers and also our older population. And then I also am a content creator, so I'm an author of books on family caregiving and aging. I also have a separate podcast, Caregiving Club on Air, and I do a variety of different webinars and writing for PBS Next Avenue and other outlets. So I'm really excited to be here with Zoe and kind of start our conversations with just the two of us on how this whole project got underway. So Zoe, my first question to you is, when we first met, I had spoken at a class at Georgetown University, where you were a graduate student, and you expressed your great interest in kind of the different ways that we're applying our gerontology education and backgrounds into different jobs and things like that. But what really got you interested initially in going into gerontology as, a career?
So this is I like to say, $1,000,000 question for someone my age getting into the gerontology industry, because as we know, we don't really see people, younger generation, getting into this. But I think a lot of times people around my age point, and why I got into it, is because I've been a caretaker myself for the past several years for my grandmother. And through this process, it's showed me the different avenues you could take being a gerontologist and learning about older adults, and not just in the sense of looking at someone in a nursing home setting or senior living administration. But this is why I was really interested in connecting with you, because yourself as a corporate gerontologist, I think you've done a really good job, an interesting way of showcasing the different possibilities there are out there to utilize being a gerontologist and not in that traditional setting. And it's something, it's just, I realize that there's so much more out there than just what is in your face of caring for our older adults, and how we can expand on that and really showcase everything that our older adult population has to offer.
Yeah, it's fascinating that you say that, because I do a lot of consulting with a lot of startup entrepreneurs and companies. And so often, and that's mostly in kind of an age tech space, or geron technology, as we call it. And so often the mission, the wish that a lot of these entrepreneurs have is to solve problems that they've seen in their own families. And I'm glad that you mentioned your grandmother, because I do think that kind of is enlightening for a lot of particularly younger people who don't always get the opportunity to see kind of the aging process, and what are some of the challenges, but also what are some of the wonderful gifts that we know that we have in caring for our loved ones. So I think that's really great. And it's really exciting to see a lot of younger generation people looking at this as a potential career.
Yeah, and I always like to touch point on it. There's so much to offer within gerontology and older adults that I think gets put on the back burner behind a lot of other things. So it's, again, one of the reasons why I was interested in studying it, just to see, like I said before, the different ways we can support our older adults in non-traditional ways as well.
Hmm.
So throwing the question back to you, I know you decided to get a gerontology degree after you kind of started working. So why did you decide to do it then?
Yeah, that's a great question. And sometimes I still sit and think to myself, my goodness, I can't believe I did that. But, I had spent about 16 years or so as I mentioned, in aging and family caregiving. I worked for one of the largest health and wellness companies internationally, and had been on several different boards like the National Alliance for Caregiving and some other organizations. So, and I had also written my first book. So in a way, it's kind of like, well, why did you feel like you needed to go back and, get this degree? I was actually working at Tech Medicine of USC at the time. And I had a friend from journalism school, where I also went to USC as my undergrad. He was the associate dean of the gerontology school, the USC Leonard Davis School of Gerontology. And we had lunch, and I had talked a few years prior, that I had thought about getting my master's, but I was kind of dragging my feet. And she said, just do it. Let's just get you into the program. And so it was a little bit of that push. But what I did is, being a business person, I sat down at my desk and I said, okay, so there's going to be a cost involved. And I didn't want to, at my age, get into, student loans, which I know can be really challenging and burdensome for
Hmm.
particularly all age groups, right? And so I thought, well, if I'm going to spend this money, what kind of investment, I'm investing in myself and my career, what do I see as the results? And so I really decided if I could recoup that investment within 3 years at the most, then I would go for it and know that I was going to be giving up a lot of my life because I still had full-time work that I was doing with my company. But that's kind of how I took a look at it. And I have to say, I was amazed because I felt like, I've been here, done that. I know all this stuff. And yet it was such great training and background for what I'm doing now. Just everything from learning how to write a research paper and think about, research projects, and really diving into the theories, whether it's the social emotional selectivity theory that Laura Carstensen from Stanford talks about, whether it's, flow theory, which, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi talks about in terms of positivity psychology. All of those things I didn't really know. I may have been kind of practicing around the edges, but I didn't really know the essence of these things. And now I'm really an expert. I used to think of myself as an expert before, but now I really do feel like I know my stuff. And it did pay off because having that corporate gerontology, because I'm not a direct, care worker, I'm not using it in more of a clinical sense or in an administrative sense, but I am in more of the business world, and being able to bring that to organizations who really understand that we have this growing older population, both in the workplace, but also in our home and family lives, and helping them develop products and services that support those things. Having that degree has really been a boon and a boost to my business. So it definitely was worthwhile. And also it put me in kind of this community of gerontologists, which I just really love, like meeting people like yourself. So that's kind of my answer on that one. My
Hmm.
question back to you is, you're graduating and you're kind of looking, forward into the future in terms of what you want to do. How do you think what you've been educated in terms of gerontology, how is that going to apply to kind of your future view of your career?
The second $1 million question that I am getting a lot, as I am coming up on my graduation. So the way, so I think your point of going to graduate school to get a master's in gerontology gave a lot of the foundational thinking and theories in caring for older adults. Before I did this, like I said, I was a caretaker. So I thought I knew what I was doing. Granted, I was aware I did not know everything, but I was like, I I see what's going on for older adults. I can understand in a way how they're feeling and how things are perceived, how there are a lot of barriers going on. But having that and now going almost receiving my master's degree, it has made me realize where I am kind of interested in what you're doing in that corporate gerontology side, mixing in that entrepreneurship and business aspect of things into our aging population. I can always like to phrase it when I'm describing to other people that the gerontology business is, I think, somewhere around a $7 trillion business. So it is a booming economic side of things where we just know it's going to be growing and growing and growing. And it's in a way an untapped market. I think definitely people who are coming into it, as my standpoint, who just don't know what's out there in a sense. So taking this into a career standpoint, I know I want to combine those, the business side and, like I said, the aging side together to better older adults, but also really expand on that economic standpoint as well. Um, Nailing down my exact career what I want to do next is that's a little bit more of a challenge, but I know there's something out there, and now I'm kind of trying to formulate what I see and what I want to do with it exactly.
So I have another question kind of as an add-on to that one, and that is that do you find that just in general out there, whether it's family or friends, when you say, yeah, I'm studying gerontology or I'm going to become a gerontologist, do people confuse that with being a medical doctor who treats older people, which as you and I both know is a geriatrician, which
Hmm.
is similar but very different. Obviously, that's in the medical profession and we're in more of that biopsychosocial framework of life, which is to me that's always where my passion's been, is in that more holistic look
Hmm.
at life course. But do you get a lot of people that are confused as to what you're becoming?
I do, and it's funny. A lot of people also don't know the term geriatrics or gerontology. That is usually a new word for them in their wheelhouse. So I explain, oh, it's with older adults, and then they think like, oh, that's the medical side of things. Like, oh, you're in med school, and I have to correct them. No, I'm not in medical school, but I'm looking at that holistic side approach. And from my master's degree at Georgetown, it was really cool, able to take a lot of different classes from that bio side, psychology side. My personal concentration, able to take policy courses and law courses. And I think it really encompasses um, everything that goes into it. It's not just one entity. We're not just looking at the biological side of things. We're looking how everything that goes into basically a whole socioeconomic system pertains to older adults.
Yeah.
And it's what I find something is really interesting.
Yeah, I think it is fascinating, and I've always been in this space for a long time, as I mentioned, and really focused a lot on kind of the wellness side for both family caregivers and older adults. And I'm writing my second book right now that has a basis of wellness. And what I find fascinating is that certainly wellness is not a new trend. If you go way back, to 3000 BC, it was being practiced in ancient, India and China and in Rome and the Greeks and all of that. So it's not new, but the basis for how they approached health was this kind of biopsychosocial. It was more about your social relationships. It was more about your environmental relationships, being outside and in fresh air, and all the things that we know contribute to longevity. So I'm really fascinated with the fact that there's this real synergy between kind of the wellness market and space, which we know is a $4.5 trillion global wellness market, and what's happening in gerontology. And I think it makes gerontologists so valuable
Hmm.
because, as we know, in our healthcare system, it's very medically focused. It is, physicians treating the body and disease and things like that, but not looking at that holistic picture as you just mentioned. So I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah. And now, kind of going off of that, you mentioned it kind of slightly, but my follow up question is, how has obtaining this degree progressed you in your career? You said you've already been working in this area before, but now how have you seen it really kind of help you personally?
Yeah. So in a couple of ways. First of all, right on the heels of, my graduation, and I didn't mention, I went back and got my master's actually in my 50s. So I'm going to cop to my age now and you know hope that I don't get any downer points because there's so much ageism, as you and I both
Never,
know, out
never.
there, right? But I did go back in my 50s. So that, a little bit later in life. And it was kind of interesting because that was, 20 plus years after I had first graduated with my undergrad degree. But right on the heels of my graduation, I landed my biggest consulting contract with a very large financial services organization that was really looking to train their employees and their workforce on issues around aging and family caregiving and all that. And I think that because they were such a large national organization, just coming in with that master's gave me that instant credibility that I needed to kind of secure that contract. So for me, there was kind of this instant gratification off of, my spending all that time, going through and getting my master's and all of that. But I think also, as I mentioned, I'm also an author and I'm working right now on my second book. And I can see the difference in, certainly my first book, I think is still, your kind of your first love. And it was about family caregiving. It was called A Cast of Caregivers. But I didn't have a lot of the science, a lot of the theories and things like that. And I think that it's making my writing just so much better. So both as a consultant, being able to come in and identify things, as well as just somebody who creates content, writing, and videos and other things. I think it's definitely enhanced my ability to present things in a way that you know everybody can understand. But it's really interesting how you pull all the threads together from gerontology. So
I have to
yeah.
say, as someone, as a almost there gerontologist, like I said, just finishing up my degree, it's a relief hearing someone say how their degree has really helped them and improved their just overall themselves, their career, everything like that. Because as you said, this is an investment. It's an investment in ourselves, and we want investments to pay off.
Yep.
So it's very rewarding to hear on your end, and also for myself, that the investment did pay off.
Right. Well, and I have to say, I was graduating right around the time COVID hit. So, in some ways, it was a scary time, particularly as a consultant and you're running your own company.
Hmm.
Everybody was kind of, we went into our caves and, no one was in their offices. And there was a lot of just, disruption around, what do we want to do, particularly for the companies that I work with. And so I think again that gerontology degree kind of got me over the hump of people hesitating or maybe not wanting to take on something new because they could see, particularly the vulnerabilities that we saw with our older population during COVID. I think that put a big spotlight
Hmm.
on aging and longevity. And so I think in some ways, rather than hurt me, I think that it actually really helped. But it was really scary because I was thinking, oh my gosh, I just spent all this money getting my master's, and will I be working over the
What's
next
the world?
couple years or whatever? Yeah, exactly. Um, so one of the things that I thought was really interesting is how impactful and how much certain courses that I took, professors that I had, all the learnings really stuck with me. There are certain things that to this day I'm just like so passionate about. What are the things that you learned during the course of your master's that either surprised you or really impacted you or influenced you and you say, wow, this is something I hadn't thought about before and now I can really see how I'm going to use this or what I'm going to do with this?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think I mentioned too. So with the program at Georgetown, really interesting. It's a very interdiscipline program. So we get to take classes, like I said, from the School of Public Policy, from the law school, things of that nature as well. And so in those a few classes that I took, all related to um, health, inequality, just global health, public policy. It was really interesting, and this is what I was impacted with: how unaware others were about our older adult population. It's one of those things. It's like everyone knows they know someone getting older, they see someone getting older, but they don't fully understand the implications of it and how that affects even themselves. So what I really enjoyed is going to those classes and bringing an aging perspective into it, and others being like, oh wow, like I didn't think how that would be, would go to this and this and this. I think that was really cool to see other people realize how important aging is to us overall. um, but also kind of more personally how it impacted me. I think so my concentration was in healthcare and economics and policy. So one of these policy classes I took, it really made me realize how important policy is for older adults and how it can really shape our population with them in general. And the work that takes and that goes into it. Everything does take hard work, but I always like to think with older adults, there's that one extra step because you're not dealing with the individual themselves. You're usually dealing with the aging process, how that impacts them, how that affects their daily life. Um, so I think that was really cool seeing the bigger picture of things. I think that was probably one of my biggest takeaway from all my courses at Georgetown was seeing the bigger picture and how everything was connected to one another.
Yeah.
Like taking my biology class to my psychology class, to the policy class, to the theories class, how intertwined really everything was. I think that was super interesting. And I'm sure you had a similar experience at USC as well with that.
Yeah, I think what's interesting to me is we talk a lot about how we still want to move things forward from a policy perspective. We want to get more focus on, the fact that a lot of people, they lump older people into, over 65 or over 50. And yet there's such a difference between someone who's 65, somebody who's maybe 85, and someone who's going to live to 100. One of the
Hmm.
statistics that always kind of blew my mind is that 50% of the 10-year-olds today are going to live to 104, and that's an average life expectancy. Their life expectancy could be even higher than that. But so I think that we need to kind of help others in society relook at what aging means, what being an older adult means, how much we thrive. We kind of live our lives in these 20-year increments, so 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 60 to 80, and it's the 60 to 80 that we haven't really focused on a lot, and where we are looking for policy. But when you think about it, I mean, it was back when I was born, which was a long time ago, that we actually instituted Older Americans Month. And we certainly in the 70s created the National Institutes on Aging, and they're doing so much great funding of research now,
Hmm.
in particularly in dementia and Alzheimer's, where I do a lot of my work. So there's a lot going on, even though we want more. But I think that generally in society hasn't caught up. I think there's still, even among my friends and family, I think there's still this kind of notion that, well, what do you do after 60? What do you do after 65? You go retire and hit a golf ball or whatever. And there's so much more to life, as you and I both know. So this whole longevity thing, I think, is something we need to rethink.
Yeah, and kind of a follow-up question to that, how have you seen the aging gerontology field just grow since you've been working in it?
Well, it's interesting. I love that we're doing this because I hope that it's going to get even more, awareness out there,
More
particularly among,
people.
yeah, among your generation, younger generations. We need more gerontologists. But I think that, because I'm an advocate and I'm out there talking about it and helping to educate people about what gerontology is, I think it's resonating, because once people really understand, oh, that's what you do. Oh, wow, that's really interesting. Okay, so yeah, I can see how that applies to my business, or I can see the value in the kinds of things that you can bring. And so it isn't just in aging services and long-term care, which a lot of our gerontologists, as we know, go into. It's a variety of things, as we talked about. We're going to be talking to a financial gerontologist, and we're going to be talking to somebody who's an urban gerontologist. We're going to explain what all those things mean. But every aspect of life, gerontology has a touch point. And so I think getting more and more experts who have a background in gerontology and can bring that into organizations and just into our communities in general is really exciting to see. So I don't know, I feel like you and I are at the tipping point of, the wave of gerontology.
That's what I'm excited for.
Yeah, exactly. So in terms of if you were thinking about giving advice to younger people, even people who are maybe in high school thinking about careers, or thinking about, people who are in maybe their first year of college and they still haven't quite figured out which way they want to go, what would be your advice in terms of going after a gerontology degree, whether it's an undergrad or a graduate degree?
Yeah, again, another good question. And my advice is kind of something similar to what I did. So, uh, in during undergrad, I took a aging class, and it wasn't with older adults; it was just with students. But one of the requirements of the class was you need to volunteer, interact with older adults once a week for 2 hours. And even though, like I said, I was a caretaker for my grandma, actually doing this course and being with older adults outside my family um, was one of the reasons why I decided to take this career path, because I saw it again beyond myself, beyond my family, the impact it has in the community in general. So I think my biggest advice would be very simple, but just go out and volunteer, go to your local senior community and sit there just for an hour, because as much as it is rewarding for the other people, it's very rewarding to yourself as well. And I think by human nature, people want to do things that make themselves feel good. So that
Yeah.
would be my advice to be go out into the community, talk to older adults outside of your family, and just hear their perspectives because half the time it's really, really cool.
And I love that because, if there's one thing we're guaranteed, it's that we're all going to get older. So it gives you a little bit of a glimpse into, what your life may be or how you might want to change it when you interact with older adults. The other thing too is that we know that this generational activities and relationships actually help us be healthier, be more well, help with mental health. When we can kind of hear stories from grandparents or older people about their perspectives and how things have changed. I think it's really insightful. And I love that. Just go out there and be with older people because I think it's really rewarding. You and I both found that.
Yeah.
You said you were a caregiver for your grandma. I was a caregiver for my grandma when I was in high school and my first years of college. And then my grandfather. And then most recently, I cared for both my dad and my stepdad at end of life. So, caregiving is a constant and aging is a constant. We're all aging. You and I just aged as we talked
1 second.
while we're talking. Exactly. And it's not something to be fearful about. It's actually something to embrace and, all of that. So, any last thoughts before we wrap up here?
No, I was just gonna say, I think one of my last questions was, "What's your favorite part about the aging and gerontology field?" But I feel like we touched on that. So, any last remarks in regards to that?
I am totally underline exclamation point what you said. Just get out and interact with older adults. I think everybody will find it so rewarding and insightful, and it's something we should all do, whether it's professionally or personally or whatever. So, well, tell us a little bit about what we should expect with the remainder of our talks. We're going to be talking to some really fascinating people.
Yeah, so it'd be really cool. We are planning to talk to different types of gerontologists that Sherry mentioned. So we have a wide array of them and showcasing again different types of careers that are out there. So, financial, urban, applied, clinical. We have more of an arts type gerontologist as well. So I think it's really interesting and will be great interest to people. But I want to say thank you to Sherry. This has been super fun. It's really cool talking about gerontology and just kind of the excitement behind it as well.
Yeah, me too. And it's exciting for me, Zoe, to see, people like yourself who are so vibrant and have, so many things to look forward to, and you're really passionate about this space. So thanks for this. And it's exciting to move into our next talks. But thanks. It was great
Thank
talking
you.
to you.
Yeah. Talk to you next time.